on addiction and mental illness, and I'll introduce these two great guys to you in just a minute. But I was reading some statistics that I wanted to share with you. But first, we've heard that several of you think that our sound is way too low. So just in case you might be technologically challenged, as I am, would you make sure that the sound is up on whatever device you're listening and that the sound on the video itself is turned up, and that should help. So these statistics that I had looked at recently from the Surgeon General's report and from NAMI and the World Health Organization say that there are 20 million Americans who have a substance use disorder, and 50% of them have a co-occurring mental illness. That's according to National Alliance on Mental Illness. Also, they say that a third of alcohol abusers and a half of drug abusers also battle mental illness. And according to the World Health Organization, mental illness and substance use disorders are the leading cause of disability worldwide. So what we're talking about today is not some tiny little issue. This is a really big deal. So let me introduce to you the two guests that I have today. This is Pastor John Baker and Pastor Johnny Baker. And if you notice the similarity in their names and the way they might even possibly look alike, purely accidental.
Just a coincidence.
Yeah, totally coincidence. But John, just tell us a little bit about yourself and Celebrate Recovery, and then Johnny, you can add to that.
Great.
Well, I want to introduce myself again as the way we do in Celebrate Recovery. I go, hi, my name is John. I'm a believer who struggles with alcoholism and anxiety. Now, what I said there is I'm a believer. My identity is my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I'm not going to let my sin addiction identify me. But it's there. It's been almost 28 years since I had a drink. But it was there, and I can never, ever forget that.
Do you want to talk a little bit about Celebrate Recovery first, or you want me to?
I can. I certainly can. Celebrate Recovery. Well,
come on, I want you to get along as we go
we'll
through
try.
this. Okay, try really hard.
I kind of keep on
I know, keep them on task.
All right. So anyways, Celebrate Recovery is a program for anyone struggling with any kind of hurt, hang-up, or habit. Now, when you hear the word recovery, you tend to think it's for drugs and alcohol, and that is about 1/3 of Celebrate Recovery. But it's for so much more. It's any kind of hurt, hang-up, or habit. And we have groups for sexual abuse, sexual addiction, codependency. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but we have about 20 different kinds of groups, and we're always starting new ones. So Celebrate Recovery has been around for 25 years, and it started at Saddleback Church. And I wrote Pastor Rick a short, concise, 13-page, single-spaced letter.
This is a famous or infamous letter in the history of Saddleback. I think it's behind glass now. It's a special case because it changed our church. So tell us about that.
Well, it was, it was the first time God ever truly gave me a vision, and that's the best way I can explain it. For 6 weeks, I would hurry home from work. My wife, bless her, she would be typing this on our Commodore 64 computer. And it was, for 6 weeks, I mean, I couldn't think of anything but this. And this letter contained the same things we're doing 25 years later. Now, we've added a lot of things to that, but the model is still the same. And trust me, I'm not smart enough for that. So it's been going 25 years. It's in 30,000 churches, 20 different languages. It's in prison systems. This is God's program.
And how many do you estimate people have in the United States or around the world have gone through a STEP study?
Right. Now, a STEP study is a 1-year program, actually, where they start with, we have 8 principles that are based on the Beatitudes, and they fit very nicely in line with the 12 steps. And we use a Christ-centered 12-step program. So basically, over 4 million people have spent a year in a Celebrate Recovery STEP study.
It's amazing.
And it is, Kay, and what is truly amazing is how God changed their life. And the freedom that I see and we get to be just a little part of in marriages restored, in individuals that were on the bottom.
Yeah.
And what God truly can do and how much He loves us. So it's been an exciting time.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to change it up just a bit here, Johnny. So I'm going to just go ahead and have you maybe tell kind of your story, and I'm going to come back to you, John, and kind of tell why Celebrate Recovery even started. Why was it even necessary in your life? And so you didn't tell us your story, so I want to hear the story. But Johnny, just tell us your story.
Yeah,
And
great.
and then I'll come back, John, and ask you that about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm going to do the same thing, introduce myself the way I do in Celebrate Recovery. I'm Johnny. I'm a believer. I struggle with alcoholism, codependency, and anxiety. And I think for me, I'm one of the 4 million people who've gone through a step study. I've gone through many of them by now, but I did my first step study when I was 16 years old. The program started just a couple of years before that. And at the time, I was totally fine, no problems. I was a teenager of an alcoholic, and so I was invited to come to Celebrate Recovery every Friday night because they knew better than to leave me home alone. And
I knew you then, and I would concur
yes,
with
exactly. And so I went through the steps and principles as a 16-year-old with Eddie, a leader of mine, who's a mentor of mine. And it was great because then fast forward about 10 years later, when it was time for me to deal with the alcoholism issues that had developed in my life, I knew exactly where to go. I came running to Celebrate Recovery. And that was a humbling but also really freeing moment for me to go to the program that he and my mom created together and at our church and find freedom over that area as well. And so for me, it's been a real honor to be a part of that legacy coming up through the church and through the program.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my story is just sort of basically in every facet trying to follow him and outdoing him. And that started on the bad stuff, and now I'm just trying to follow him and keep pace with him on the ministry side as well. So I'm lucky to have him as a role model and somebody who has blazed that
Paved
trail
the way.
for me.
Yeah. So, John, you and I were talking right before we started that there is this statistic that says that if you take your first drink before you're 15, that you are 4 times more likely than the average person to have an alcohol addiction at some point in your life. If you take your first drink after 20, you don't have that same statistic, but if you take your first drink before 15, that's a stat. That, and you said that fit very neatly into your own personal story.
Yes, I believe that statistic.
Because
I'm proof of that statistic.
Yeah.
Very, very innocently, my grandfather, who was a great man, he would have a beer, maybe one on the weekends or whatever, and he was barbecuing, and I think I was like 12 or 13, and weeks I would say, "Can I have a taste of your beer, Grandpa?" And so finally I think he got tired of me nagging, and he really thought that I would just spit it out.
Yeah.
Sorry for
That's
that
fine.
visual,
That's
but
fine. That's
anyway,
fine.
so and he thought I wouldn't like it. I guess that sounds better. But he thought, so he gave me the bottle, and I took a drink, and I tried to take another one. He grabs it out of my hand. I love the taste of beer from that very first drink. And for not after that, I didn't really drink until I got into a fraternity in college, but I drank for 19 years. I was a pilot in the Air Force and in business, and I was known as the functional alcoholic until I wasn't.
Right.
And alcohol began to own me. And so I don't call alcohol a disease. I call it a sin addiction. There was time when I was truly out there sinning. I mean, the Bible makes that very clear about drunkenness. But then it became a day, and I can't tell you when it was, but there was a day that I crossed that line, and that sin became an addiction that owned me. And it was a real, real struggle. But once I found a Christ-centered program, which basically was Celebrate Recovery, and God, it was hard for me not to participate in it, and, but by then I had about a year's sobriety. And so God was preparing me. So it's been a journey, and if anybody's got any hurt, hang-up, or habit, we're going to tell you a little later in the program about how to find out more about Celebrate Recovery.
Okay, so I have to stop you. Because you said 2 things that were really important that I think we need to, and you guys can.
That's unusual.
Well, you frequently say things that are important, but there's 2 things that I think that probably could people need a little more conversation about, because you used the word sin addiction, and then you used the word addiction, and you separated those 2. And I think that's a really critical thing for us to just talk about for a moment, because that could we talk a lot about in the world now recovery of a disease.
Right.
And we need to maybe tease out for people who have always thought and only thought that addiction was completely sinful. Those in the church maybe who
Right.
would think that, and then
Right.
those who would say, no, it's all and only a disease. So can you kind of maybe tease out a little bit your understanding, the two of you, of because you made a distinction between those
Right,
two.
right.
And I think that's an important thing to
Yeah.
explain your thoughts there.
You wanted,
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple components to it. So when we talk about addiction, we often talk about that there's a character component, there's a choice component, and there's a chromosome component. So as an adult child of an alcoholic who made the choice to become an alcoholic himself, there are probably parts of my DNA that if you teased out with over the generations,
Right.
there's a part of me that's going to be more inclined to addiction, and my kids probably the same, and all that kind of stuff. But there was a moment, Kay, where I decided I was going to be okay. That although he had struggled with alcoholism, I was gonna learn from him and not make the same choices.
You're going to
he
drink,
made.
but not become.
I was
an
going to do
alcoholic.
it better, and I was going to do it where
you
he
almost did.
Yeah, well, where he drank, as he said, he was a functional alcoholic, so he would drink. I believe that if anybody would have tested his blood alcohol level,
Yeah.
it probably was about the same
Yeah.
over the course of a day. Where I drank, I just a lot all the time, and he never got arrested. I did. He
Yeah.
never lost jobs. I did.
Yeah.
There was. I hid it from my wife Jenny for the first 4 years of our marriage,
Yeah.
the extent of my drinking. And so, is there a chromosome component of that? Probably. And I tell my kids now, it's fire.
Right. Right.
Don't touch it.
Don't
You
touch
know,
it.
it's not the kind of thing that you want to mess around with.
Yeah.
However,
And then there's also, as we're finding that there are the changes that happen in the brain.
Right.
Once, if there's over a period of time,
Right.
either alcohol or a drug
Right.
can change the chemistry of the brain, and then it isn't a sin addiction. At that point, the brain is not functioning right
it's
at all.
addicted.
It's
Yeah.
an addiction.
Yep.
I just think that's important to
Yeah.
distinguish there.
I'll never forget. When I got a DUI, I had to go to a number of classes afterwards where we would talk about it, and in groups and classes. And during one of the classes, the leader said that the minute he was able to say he was an addict or an alcoholic was the most freeing moment of his life because he never had to drink again. And I was sitting there in full-on denial, blaming the cops, blaming the weather, blaming everything else for my arrest except for me.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, Kat, I've never forgotten. Inside that moment, I went, "There's no freedom in that," because the minute I admit I'm an alcoholic, I'll never be able to drink again, and I couldn't foresee going on
Yeah.
without my medicine.
Yeah.
And
Without
I
the
think
alcohol.
he talked about enjoying the taste the first time, but that's a very small part. You know what I mean? That goes away.
Right.
The
The pleasure part.
Right. It
Yeah.
really does become this, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit
Right.
later, but it really does become this self-medication of saying there's other things in my life I don't want to deal
Well,
with.
let's talk about that, because at what point did you realize that you might also have some mental health challenges? We
Yeah.
said that there was what is called a dual diagnosis,
Right.
or co-occurring
Right.
between a substance use disorder or substance misuse and mental illness, mental
Yeah.
health challenges. So you're alluding to that. So go ahead
Right.
and just tell us about that.
I think for me, Kay, I've had what I just thought I was a worrier since I remember second
You're
grade.
just really good at it.
I've said I'm a VIP of worrying.
Yeah.
If you tell me something good,
Yeah.
I'll tell you what you should worry about with that. I'm really good
Stand
at
on
worrying.
it.
And I just thought it was sort of part of my DNA.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I'd be in church and Rick would say, worrying is a form of not trusting God enough. And I get really mad because I'd sit there going, but this is a part of my shape. This
Yeah.
is who I am. I can't
the way I'm
help
made.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
And it really didn't happen until a couple of years ago, even though I've been sober for a while and I've been working through recovery for a while,
Yeah.
that I really went, this anxiety that I feel is it's not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be
Yeah.
with me everywhere
This
I
is
go.
affecting my life.
It completely.
Yeah.
And I began taking medication for it, and I began getting help for it. And as that level of general anxiety started to kind of ease up a little bit, then going through a step study and looking at my behavior and kind of going backwards even a little bit, I was going, oh my gosh, this has affected
Yeah.
Not just my alcoholism, but the way that I am with people, and it has affected the way that I collect things, and I get obsessive about different things, and it's all as this sort of chemical dump to
Yeah.
feel better.
Yeah. So
You know?
alcohol for you, as you said, it was your medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It.
I wanted to turn everything down.
Yeah.
I wanted the stress to go down, I wanted the fear to go down, I wanted the anxiety to go down. And so for me, there was a time where it was party, woohoo, having fun, and then there was a time where I was in the den of my condo
Yeah.
with the door shut and the lights off, Jenny asleep in bed, and me getting drunk in our den
Yeah.
in isolation,
Yeah.
just so that it would all sort of calm
Become
down.
manageable
Yeah.
and calm.
Yeah, and just sort of level, you know.
Let them know how long you've been sober.
Yeah, I've been sober for 13 years, over 13 years. But I talk about, I've been sober from alcohol for 13 years. I've been sober for anxiety for about 13 minutes. Because
That long?
I still, even
yeah.
with it all, it's still just this,
Well,
it's learning.
this is Earth, and everything doesn't automatically get fixed. And you would be the first to say Celebrate Recovery doesn't fix everything. That's even all
Right.
the things that might
Right.
have made you drink more to dull the pain. And then you, John, your story. But I mean, when did you recognize that anxiety was also connected with alcohol for you?
Because I drank not to get drunk. I drank not to feel. And that's a real big distinction. If I had too much to drink, I blew it that day. But like Johnny said about my blood alcohol, I just didn't want to feel life. And so when I took that, like Johnny said, that medicine, alcohol, and I didn't have that anymore, it took me some time to really, okay, I'm okay. I don't need that, but I would still become anxious about certain things. And, so I've been struggling with that I've been struggling with it for a long time.
whole
And
life,
it-
probably.
I think
Well, yeah.
something important to point out too is that there may be people watching this that don't struggle with drugs and alcohol.
Right.
But there are other, like we say, hurts, hang-ups, and habits in their
Right.
life.
Right.
Spending too much money that you don't have, looking at things online that are inappropriate, relationships that are out of control, eating too much or not enough. There's a bunch of different ways that this can manifest in people's lives. And I think it's sometimes tempting to go, oh, cool, these guys are talking about
Right.
alcoholism.
These are for the people who
so
are addicts
that
or
doesn't
misuse
that
a
doesn't
substance.
apply
Right.
to me.
Right.
But there are different ways in all of our lives where these things can sort of start to poke out a little bit.
Right.
And I think it's important to know to take a look at that when that.
And again, out of the 4 million people, 1 out of 3 were dealing with drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
That
So
that
keep
completed a step study, right? Okay.
So just keep that in mind. This program is for any hurt, hang-up, habit, like Johnny said. The fastest growing group we have right now are sexual addiction groups, for men and for women.
Yeah.
And that's because the internet is so available.
Yeah, it's changed everything.
Yeah.
So why does Celebrate Recovery care about people living with a mental illness, and then how can Celebrate Recovery become a safe place and a part of a support for people who are living with mental illness as well as another hurt, habit, or hang-up?
Well, you had a lot to do with that.
Oh, I thought you started to say you asked me a bunch of questions, and so I was nodding my head, and then I realized you.
No,
Yeah,
I
okay,
got the questions, but you did. About 3 years ago or a little more, I have had the opportunity to kind of work with Kay on her mental health team, and it's a signature issue, signature ministry. That's easy for you to say, but that's of Saddleback Church mental health. And very honestly, I really didn't know that much about it. And I've learned, and I really discovered, hey, I have a struggle, and I freely admit it. But then there was this stigma,
Yeah,
and that stigma is huge.
gigantic. Yeah.
So I want to be able to talk about, and I know there's a lot of people that are struggling with bigger issues or whatever, and I pray for you, and I really, really do. But there is help, and that's what's so exciting. Now, Celebrate Recovery, what we did last year is we started a mental health initiative. I never would said before, my name is John, I'm a believer who struggles with alcohol and anxiety. It was just alcohol. But anxiety is what really caused me to drink. That was my answer to it. instead of going to a doctor and getting help, I just found my own cure. Right, it lasted a while, but it was so. Anyway, I've learned so much in these last 3 years that I accepted. I can identify now, and I've seen so many people hurt because they've got this secret, and they're afraid to share it. Well, don't be. The world is changing, and we have got to together break the stigma. So what we did very quickly with Celebrate Recovery is this initiative, is we are taking mental health, and we have been dealing with those struggling with mental health, me too, since the very beginning. And you know, my wife and I have been in this ministry for 25 years, and I gotta get off the subject here because I want to make sure I thank her. If she hadn't accepted my amends, there'd be no Celebrate Recovery.
That's right. We love you, Cheryl.
That's right. We'll be married 48 years this October. So anyway, back to my story, but honey, I love you too. And so,
And Jenny,
that's
Johnny's
right,
wife.
that's right. And so, but it is a time where it was really important for us to take that step and not just kind of talk about it. The number of addicts, drugs, alcohol that have something that's called dual diagnosis. And what that means is they're addicted to alcohol or drugs, and they're also struggling with some kind of mental illness. When I learned that, I mean, it was like the lights came on. And so how, you know, we've got all these people that have gone through this that have been dealing with a mental
Right.
health
And
issue.
you just didn't know it.
And I didn't.
You weren't aware of it.
I
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
Well, and myself.
Right,
you
in
know,
yourself
so,
and with
yeah.
other people.
So,
Yeah.
you know, so it was, so we started, we're not going to just talk about it and say that number every once in a while. We're going to have a mental health initiative. And we have a mental health director now at Celebrate Recovery. This is exciting.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
And so we're reaching out. Now, let me just tell you, we are not there to fix you
Right.
if you come to Celebrate Recovery, because we're not there to fix anyone. We have groups, we have curriculum, we give you the environment of safe place, but God is going to fix you. And that's the answer. So, but let me just tell you what we can and can't do very quickly. We can, if you come to Celebrate Recovery, we will have a list of the places, churches that may have mental health support groups, some therapists in the area, as many as we could find. There'll be different, there's a lot of different Celebrate Recoveries out there, and give them some grace. We just started this, you know, not that long ago. But they would be able to give you that sheet. Now, you know, that's really easy to say, hey, you're struggling with a problem, here's a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Praying for you.
Yeah.
But we're going to take that a step further in Celebrate Recovery. We're going to have people come alongside of them and help sponsor them, like we do with any other of the things
Hurt,
that struggles.
habit, or
Yeah,
yeah.
we have it at Celebrate Recovery, and they will offer to go with them to that support group. They'll
Like to your
offer-
doctor, or
Right.
go with somebody
Right.
who's living with mental illness.
Right.
Also go
You
with
know,
them to their
if
appointment.
you're, you know, if you'd like me to, I'll be there with you the first couple of times.
Hmm.
And that, you know, that's going to get them there, hopefully.
That's
you know.
great.
And then the other thing we're going to do is, if they're a sponsor, they're going to, sponsors talk to their sponsorees, hopefully every day. You know, it could be a just short talk, or it could be a long talk if they're struggling. They're going to talk to their sponsor every day, and they're actually signing a little contract. This is a little different, where their sponsor has permission to ask them if they took their medication that day. And that's, you know, that's a big one, and that's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we're going to continue to reach out and help them as much as we can, and then let God's power and the safety of the group. There's nothing that beats somebody else saying, I'm an alcoholic,
Yeah.
I'm whatever, but I'm also, I struggle with
Yeah.
mental health.
You know, Kim, when he first wrote that letter to Rick and they started Celebrate Recovery, there were a lot of churches in the world that if somebody showed up with a drug and alcohol problem, the answer would be read your Bible and pray more.
Absolutely.
And we know,
Same answer for
and that's what
if you have
yeah.
mental
And
illness.
right now, I think there's still a lot of churches that if you show up and you say, I've got this mental health issue, people are going to say, read your Bible and pray
right.
more. And there's almost a shame if you're taking medication,
Absolutely.
or there's a shame if you're talking about it, or you're weak or something like that. And one thing that Celebrate Recovery exists to do is to say, no, that's not enough for drugs and alcohol. It's not enough for any addiction or hanging up or habit, and it's not enough for mental illness.
It's not enough for anxiety or depression.
And so,
or
you
eating
know,
disorder.
I've talked about before, I went through a season of depression that was pretty intense, and had somebody said, pray more, I would have laughed, because that's all I did. Was pray and ask God to lift it. And, you know, it took a long time to kind of work through that season. I had to learn a lot of different things through that.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, as he said, breaking the stigma, one thing Celebrate Recovery has done with a lot of issues is kind of gone in there and kicked the door in and say, no, we're not going to just let that be.
Right.
And we want to do the same thing. And so we may not always know exactly, and Celebrate Recoveries around the world, they may not know exactly how to help someone who shows up, but they will love that person and they will support that person and they'll work with that person. And I think sometimes that's just sort of knowing I have a safe place
That's right.
to go
Somebody
to.
to listen.
Yeah.
And to be, and the thing is, we all struggle. And to me, that, you know, you all have your own slogans within CR, but to me, the slogan about CR is, we all struggle. Please don't struggle alone.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
CR is a safe place to struggle, to be, to find God's help, God's hope. So Johnny, tell us, if somebody, you know, is watching and they really don't know much about, where can they go to find a Celebrate Recovery group in their area?
Right.
And tell us that.
The best place to go is to our webpage. It's celebraterecovery.com. Pretty easy to find. There's a group locator on that you can put in your zip code, and you can find Celebrate Recoveries in a radius around you, and that works really well. If you're somebody who's looking to start a Celebrate Recovery in your church, we do have a couple of summits coming up that you can learn about on that as well, where you can come get some training. So you hear us talking about groups and step studies, and you're going, I want to do this, but that sounds complicated.
Right.
It really isn't.
Yeah.
We'll teach you how to do it. We do
I
one
mean,
days
you
all
guys,
over.
sincerely, down to how many ketchup packets you need to have
We get
for
pretty
your
granular.
barbecue dinner for the people
Yeah.
coming in. I mean, incredibly detailed help is available at celebraterecovery.com.
Celebraterecovery.com, yeah. We're all over on social media, but if you go there, you'll find most of the
And I want to
information.
mention one more thing real quick, is we have a Celebrate Recovery app, and it's free, and you can download it and have it on your phone. So if you're travel, you're in another town, you can find a meeting right there on your phone. But it's also got a lot of the videos we use. You can watch the videos, you can download the videos, do whatever you want with them. But I truly believe that, you know, you need support, and you need that person that is going to, you know, if you are traveling, that you could call
Absolutely.
back home.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're going to connect. And you can go to a Celebrate Recovery.
Yay!
You know, so, I mean, and they're
You
going
could stay in your hotel room at Howard Johnson's and watch Frasier reruns, or you could
Right,
go
that's
to
right,
a
that's
CR
right,
meeting in
that's
town.
right.
Hey, you guys, thanks for joining us. Check out celebraterecovery.com, and there is always hope.